People's Justice. He's one of the most fearless fighters I know for police brutality and has been on the front lines in both California and New York, and it's really just an honor for me to pass the mic down to Aidge.
I have a full house tonight. Make some noise for yourselves if you're out there. This is beautiful. I mean, no joke, you know, we do a lot of like speaking engagements around, a lot of folks organize things, a lot of times there'll be a handful of the same old folks you've seen in space, but there's a lot of folks I see that are, you know, friends and loved ones, and there's also a lot of folks who I don't know in here, so that's a beautiful thing. It also makes me extremely nervous to see all these new faces, and I gotta start being the one to talk over here, so thanks a lot, Lee. Appreciate that. But no, I guess just getting into things, you know, as Lee mentioned, I'm the coalition coordinator for People's Justice, for police accountability, or for community control and police accountability. What we are, for those who don't know, is a coalition between different organizations who serve within and are for, by, and with communities of color throughout the city, as well as queer communities. Our leadership body right now is led by Malcolm X Grassroots movement, the Justice Committee, and CAB, Organizing Asian Communities. Obviously all these groups doing work in their own communities on various levels, but then coming together within People's Justice in the wake of Sean Bell's murder in 2006, coming together after that into People's Justice to really try to take these things on head on. And you know, we support all the different tactics that are being done throughout the city right now, from the things going on in City Hall, the things going on in the courtrooms around federal lawsuits against Stop and Frisk and NYPD, you know, discriminatory policing and whatnot. But our main work is really focused on the ground. While we're very supportive of those fights and think those are of utmost importance to us really getting freedom, getting the victories we need to really see change in the city, our place within People's Justice and the place that we really find our own organizing and our power in is really in the grassroots, from the bottom up organizing. And for us that means taking things on and trying to make the changes we can right now for ourselves, and not waiting to ask the powers that be to give us our freedom, but to take it into our own hands. And not asking the NYP to give us back the power that's so rightfully ours, but taking it back. And making sure that we don't ask these questions, but we make sure that we are the ones standing up and making it happen for ourselves. And so with that, basically two pieces to the work we do, which is, you know your rights work, spreading the information that people need in order to know when the police can and can't violate them, what you can do, and then doing cop watch, because we acknowledge that even if you know your rights, it does not mean the police are not going to continue to violate your rights. If they're going to violate your rights, they're going to do it, right? So we need to, that just means so much more about how we need to be able to watch our own backs and watch out for each other in these cases, because knowing your rights is not going to be the magic word and whatnot. But if we can watch out for each other, and we can tell each other that no matter how long this takes, I'm staying here to make sure that you go home safe tonight, right? And that's going to be a major difference maker in a lot of the work that we're doing. You know, right now we're organizing cop watch teams throughout the city, and something we've really seen in the last year, and I think this has to do with some of the incredible organizers that have come on board with our coalition, but also it speaks so much to all the different tactics that are being taken throughout the city, and how police accountability has really become an issue that people are taking on. It's become really like a breakfast conversation for a lot of families. What's going on with Stop and Frisk? What's going on with Ramarley Graham, with Chantel Davis, with Kamani Gray? What's going on with Bloomberg? Why is he going crazy on all our communities right now? They talk about putting Ray Kelly into the Department of Homeland. Are you serious? What's going on? So, I think it's horrible that we have to talk about these things, right? Because, that just means how bad it is right now. But the beautiful thing is that for years, since post 9/11, things have been very different in New York City. If y'all were around in 2000, I wasn't out here, I was in LA. But 2000, the same time that we were taking on the Rampart scandal in Los Angeles, y'all was dealing with the death of Amadou Diallo. And the rise up in New York, it was all very inspiring to all of us across the nation, seeing the work that was going on here in New York with different things that were going on like that. And since post 9/11, and the way the police were reframed by the powers that be into this untouchable force that is our heroes and the people that keep our city safe from terrorism and crazy criminal-minded people, realizing that all the real criminals are the ones that are sitting in the courtrooms and in the legislative bodies and have the badges on their chests and stuff, right? But it's been very inspiring to be part of this movement right now, and sitting at the table with spaces with folks that are at the table with us right now. I think I would say, I know we're probably going to get into it some, and I'm kind of all over the place because I just ran down here from somewhere else. I'm still kind of gathering myself. But I think one thing I would love to say is that while I think it's of utmost importance that everybody in here takes on this struggle against police violence as your own struggle, whether or not you're the one who's being targeted on a daily basis by the police, whether or not you live in the neighborhoods that are being targeted, we all have to find our own ways to help support our own peoples, right? And everybody in the space, no matter if you're being targeted right now or not, it is up to you and it's up to all of us to stop these things. But I think one thing that we really have to recognize is some of the real strength and some of the most inspiring work is not coming from people like myself. It's not coming from, you know, who it is, but it's not coming from a lot of folks who are out on a daily basis, but a lot of the most inspiring work to me is work that's being done by some of our brothers and sisters like Constance and folks who are under the control. I can't imagine, you know, I've been beat up by the police. I spent my last day of high school, you know, instead of being at the school, you know, having fun with my friends, I spent my last day of high school locked up with like an 8-inch gash on my forehead. They jumped me and beat me down on a rooftop. You know, I've had other situations like that, and they helped lead me to where I am now. But really, you know, that's only so far as being affected. I think you can't even imagine, I can't even imagine what it's like to be affected to the point of a sister like Constance, or you know, Natasha Davis, you know, or Natasha Duncan, Chantel Davis's sister, or Juanita Young, Malcolm Ferguson's you know, mother, or Nicholas Hayward Sr., Nicholas Hayward Jr.'s father, right? And folks who have actually lost somebody to the police and to this violence that for many of us is an abstract thought. But for nobody is it more real than the parents who are standing up on a daily basis. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that and acknowledge how strong and courageous Constance and other brothers and sisters like her are in this struggle, and how important it is that we stand fully in support of them and come out when this grand jury verdict comes out in the Ramarley Graham case, when we actually see this brutal murder of Richard Hayes, NYPD officer Richard Hayes, hopefully crossing fingers that the grand jury does the right thing and decides that he needs to go to trial for murder of Ramarley. And so everybody in this room, I'm not sure speak about it more, but we need to be out there for them when this happens. And so not only do we need to be in the courtroom when the stop and frisk trial is happening, not only do we need to be calling up our council people and making sure that they are voting for the Inspector General and voting for the racial profiling bill and making sure these things are happening on a macro level, but we also need to be there on the ground. And when we see the police messing with one of our young brothers and sisters, we need to be able to take that 5-10 minutes out of our day to stop and watch them and support them and be there through every second of this with them and let them know, you know, if somebody else had done this for another one of our peoples that we lost, if somebody had broken out a camera the minute they saw the killer of Kamani Craig come up the block, maybe Kamani would be in this room with us right now, right? Maybe if somebody had pulled out a camera, you know, when Nicholas Hayward Jr. was in the hallway of his building and police came running through his building because they saw kids playing cops and robbers, maybe that wouldn't have happened, right? And I think in so many ways we can see that, you know, this system teaches us to be dog eat dog and to only care about yourself. And don't worry about what's happening to the next man or woman. Go about your business, keep shopping and going to work, and just, you know, do your thing and enjoy your life and be ignorant to what's happening around you. Because if it's not affecting you, then it doesn't matter to you, right? But we need to get into the mind state of understanding that 9 out of 10 times when police stop and frisk somebody, they end up letting that person go, right? Because that person hasn't done anything. And that's only because, the only reason it's 9 out of 10 is because they found something to charge somebody with in one of those cases, right? So the reality is people who actually committed crimes in those is much, much less. But going off of 9 out of 10, that means when you see the police stopping somebody on the street, that means 9 out of 10 times they have done it for absolutely no reason at all. And that means we need to change our mind state from an idea of what did that person do to get stopped, to why did the police feel like they had a right and ability to stop that person for no reason at all. And I think if we can get into that mind state and stop looking at each other as people we need to be afraid of, and start looking at each other as people we need to love and care for and hold hands with and support on a daily basis, then we're going to start to make these real changes that we can make. You know, I wanted to talk a lot about some of the different movements that are going on up here, but I'm sure we'll have more time in the panel, and I don't want to take up too much time because everybody knows I tend to just blab, blab, blab. So we'll get into some of the other stuff that's going on a little later. I also just want wanted to touch, on some of the things in Tiny and what's happening locally to what has been going on nationally and whatnot. And New York has been real heavy, and it's not the only place this is happening. Stop and Frisk is something that really came into the limelight because of Giuliani and Bratton and now Bloomberg and Kelly, right? But it's not like Stop and Frisk is the only way that our peoples are under attack across this nation. It's not the only police protocol that is forcing our young peoples to be brutalized, murdered, incarcerated at increasingly alarming rates. No matter the name they give to this, it's happening across the country. And it's bigger than just about who's the mayor. It's bigger than who's the police chief. It comes down to the fact that these police are literally descendants of slave catchers and union busters and the purpose they serve in this society, right? It's much bigger than just brutality and racism. It comes down to what their purpose is in this society. And once we begin to understand that, we can start to make real change. Because it's not just about changing the face of the police when their entire foundation is crooked from the bottom, right? There's a reason why it's not about bad apples, right? Why can the killer of Oscar Grant, if y'all haven't seen Fruitvale Station, please go see it 10 times. The person who killed him and shot him in cold blood when he laid on the ground. And for those who don't know his name, in the movie, the officer had a name badge that said Irving. Obviously the real officer didn't give the permission to use his real likeness, right? His real name is Johannes Messerly, and I want y'all to all know his name because we should all know who these people are. We shouldn't just know the name of the person who's been stolen from us, but we should know who these murderers are so we can really hold them accountable. And so their lives cannot maintain as they leave. But, I think we've seen that these killings are happening across the nation, and it's not only here, it's internationally. We see the way that people of color are being criminalized regardless of where they are, whether it's in the California, Pelican Bay, or whether it's in Guantanamo Bay, or whether it's just in the streets of the Bronx or Brooklyn. Our peoples are being treated the same all over the place, and we need to start drawing these connections to each other. And once we do that, that's when real change is going to happen.
Again, I'm really honored to have the whole panel here and such a great group of folks. And I'm going to introduce the next speaker, who is Michelle Crentsil, who is an amazing labor organizer and racial justice organizer. Should I say who you organize for? Yeah. So Michelle Crentsil is an organizer with the Service Employees International Union. She organizes physicians, and she is out in the trenches of social justice fighting. I first met Michelle at Occupy Wall Street, and she has been, she's one of those folks in New York, I'm sure a lot of you know her because she has her hand in virtually every struggle.
First off, I'm honored to be here on this panel with such amazing people who do amazing work. As a woman who grew up Black in America, this is a reality that I think a lot of Black Americans, a lot of people of color face. And so, honestly, I wanted to kind of just briefly start off with just a few moments of silence for folks who have had to lose family, friends, loved ones to this type of violence. There are people who we know, but there are probably people in this room who we don't know who have had to go through that struggle, myself included, of losing family and loved ones. So if we could just have a few moments of silence for that. Thank you. So I think my part of the talk, I was supposed to kind of go over a bit of the historical context and really talk about why this is such an important moment and why we're here, even though it seems like we're here again and again and again to talk about this, but why it's still important to do this. And so I kind of want to break it down in a few different points. Usually when I talk, I have to organize my thoughts around three things. So one of the first things is kind of, just, I guess, distinctly naming the problem, like addressing root issues. I think we often talk about symptoms and things like that. We have to be able to name the problem, root cause of what it is, and I will get into that shortly. Second point, understanding history, how we got here. And then a third one is kind of acknowledging the challenges of the present to inform how we're going to move forward. So the problem? What is the problem? I think we've heard a lot of things. We say racial profiling, bias policing, et cetera, et cetera. Well, the problem is white supremacy. Okay? I don't want to dance around it and call it other things because people are like, well, it's uncomfortable. Well, I don't care. People are dying. So if you're uncomfortable, that's too bad. Because I don't want to have to explain to the children that I'm going to have that I didn't want to talk about white supremacy and make it uncomfortable. I have to have these very serious and uncomfortable conversations with my family and children about how, violence is just an occupational hazard of being black. So I don't want to have to do that. So I'm just going to say, the problem is white supremacy. It is racism. And what we have to understand is that American society functions on it. It is central to American society. I remember, J. Edgar Hoover was talking about the Black Panthers were the greatest threat to the American way of life. What he meant was organized black people are the greatest threat to capitalism. He said it outright. How many other ways do we want to put it? So I think that's a place where I want to start. We have to understand that the history of America in terms of race, how we feel about people of color, how we feel about black bodies, people of African descent in this country. There is a hatred, there is a racism, a complete hatred and dehumanization of black people in this country to further power capitalism in American society. That's how it works, that's how it runs. You don't have one without the other, okay? So we've got that laid out, but we move on. So, I think that's why, I wanted to really start there. And, yes, we've really come a long way, I must admit, but I don't want us to fall into traps, the biggest trap being post-racial America. And I say it like that because it's just, I have goosebumps. I'm like already shuddering. I'm just like, this post-racial America.
We got a black president.
Right, yeah, our president's black, put your, hang your hat, we're good, it's all over. No. Again, we have to name the problem, we can't get away from the problem. We must know that as long as America is functioning as this American society, as capitalist society, then racism is central to keeping it open. I was reading a really great article from a professor of mine, actually it wasn't a professor of mine, but anyway, he wrote a kind of response to the Zimmerman verdict. And one of the lines he had said, he had always thought that Derek Bell, who was a civil rights lawyer and a professor at Harvard Law, had this kind of like pessimist view, but then he was just like, actually no, this is very true. And he said that racism is an integral, permanent, and indestructible component of this society. Now, I think what I want to call into question is, yes, it is integral. Now, the big kind of, we're at a crossroads of, is it permanent and indestructible? Is its core in American society something that we can't fight against and eradicate in a way where we can be dismantling capitalism? I think that is the big question. I don't have the answer, actually. I don't know. I can't say yes or no. But I think that is a big question that we're going to have to come up against when we're talking about how to move forward. So now that I've talked a little bit about white supremacy, I think the biggest thing is to understand that it's very insidious. It's structural, it's institutional, it's internalized, and it's even personal. But they all inform each other. And so kind of understanding that it is integral to society and looking at Trayvon Martin's case in particular, looking at that verdict, you see that, in order for this verdict to happen, you have to have a society that is fully immersed in racism, where you can build this sense of hate, contempt, and total dehumanization of black people to make a non-guilty verdict viable. And I think that's what we really have to understand, and we have to realize that there's separate realities for black men and for black people in America. One of the things when I said, let's kind of take history into account, I wrote down a couple of things. Sorry, my notes are all over the place. But I wrote down a few different cases, I just wrote down names. I have Oscar Grant, I have Emmett Till, I have Rodney King, and I have Troy Davis. Because I really wanted to focus us on the separate reality for Black men in America. And this is a hard, difficult conversation, but we have to have it. You know, I know a lot of people want to do the kind of like, oh, you know, we're all together, let's like throw some like kind of just like blanket terms around. But no, there's a separate reality for Black men in America. You know, my brother was telling me a story when he was learning to drive, and I grew up in Kentucky. His white driver instructor was like, okay, look, I don't have to tell all my students this, but I need to tell you this. If you get pulled over, keep your hands visible on the wheel and narrate your movements. Because if you don't, something bad might happen to you. That's what I'm talking about, where there's a separate reality for Black men in America. He even said, I don't have to tell all my students this. You're not gonna have to tell, not every mother is gonna have a conversation like this with her son. It's a separate reality. So, you know, I wanna talk about Oscar Grant, Emmett Till, Rodney King, Troy Davis, in particular reasons for it. So I bring up Oscar Grant, of course, to kind of look at, you know, everyone's watches the footage and you're totally appalled. You're just like, I don't understand how this is happening. But, you know, you have to go back to the continual fear, hatred, inherent dehumanization of Black men in America basically from the jump, from when they got here, you know, having that piled on and piled on and piled on, where that becomes possible. Now take Rodney King. Now the reason I really wanted to look at the Rodney King case is because that verdict, of course, mirrors, not mirrors, but you look at that verdict and then you look at the Trayvon Martin verdict. Both juries, all white, I believe. With regard to Trayvon Martin, we have one non-white one. But both juries, you know, not of your peers, both of those. And so you've got with the Rodney King verdict, you have an all-white jury watching slow motion video of a man being beaten by 4 armed cops and deciding that he was in control of every moment. Strange. Right, strange. But yes, that can only happen if you are in a society, again, where white supremacy is central, and you can decide that no matter what was actually happening at the time, the Black man is a threat. The Black man is someone to be feared, to be hated, and to be thought lesser than human. So that's how that becomes possible. Now, the reason I bring up Troy Davis, of course, is, you know, looking at the disproportionate the disproportionate amounts of executions of Black men. Again, something that is possible because we think Black men are less than human. You know, I'm repeating this so many times because this is real. This is a reality, and I want it to stick in people's heads. I want it to be very uncomfortable. I want it to kind of burn in people's minds, because this is the, you know, the kind of repeated image and idea that is entering Black men, entering Black youth, entering Black people. We are not valued. We are not seen as human. We are less than human. We are feared. We are a threat. We are the greatest single threat to American way of life. All right, everyone knows about Emmett Till and with the open casket, you know, and like the very kind of public mourning of it. I see that as like kind of a use of that, you know, being public. Even with Trayvon Martin, they had to go public in order to even seek out justice. You know, there was the petition, having the rallies and marches just to bring Zimmerman to trial. You know, you don't have kind of the privilege of privacy. You have to be public to show that this is important, you know? And so that's where I wanted to kind of talk about seeing the public mourning and public grieving with Emmett Till. But let me move forward a little bit as far as, you know, the present challenges. One of the biggest challenges, like I said, this post-racial American bullshit, sorry, but that's just how I feel. Capitalism depends on racism, so if somebody says post-racial to me one more time, like, I'm gonna explode, like my head's just gonna boom. We're not, that's just not, get it out of your heads. Wrong, false, lies. Clearly not in post-racial America. I think that has been something that has been said to throw people off. And there is kind of a sheen of progress, you know, that is the post-racial America thing, the sheen of progress. You know, we're walking around waving iPhones, you know, our president's Black, you know, I'm gonna go back to my apartment and like hang out with my friends, like, woo, awesome. Like, we made it. We made it. No, okay? It's not about the fact that I have an iPhone. It's not about the fact that the president is black. He's even coming on national television almost in like this weird kind of confession type thing of like, you know, even when I was growing up, people stopped me in stores. You know, like, I remember seeing a satirical headline of, I think it was The Onion, that's like, nation reeling after president reveals he's black. And I thought that was really funny, but also kind of accurate. It seems like he was confessing that he was black. And you know, it showed that, like, you know, even he was powerless against this like beast of racism. And so, you know, I think what we have to realize is that this whole post-racial nonsense, I mean, it is nonsense. We've got the Voting Rights Act being completely eroded, and that's in conflict with this false sense of post-racial America. Like, you know, that it didn't make any sense, but of course it happened. And then, so we're trying to figure out, how do we move forward? I mean, I think we see that there is a lot of action being taken. I'll talk a little bit about kind of like the Dream Defenders now. The Dream Defenders down in Florida, who are really using a lot of organizing and direct action. And the whole thing that's important about that, we need to be organizing to build capacity to shift power. That, you know, is the bottom line. As far as like where power is that it's not within our communities, and we need to be building the capacity to shift power to where we have it, to make sure that we can make the changes we want. You know, and one of the things that they're pushing forward is Trayvon's law, which has 3 pillars. You know, repeal stand your ground, and racial profiling by the police or racial policing, and in Florida's zero tolerance school policing policy, which is very linked to the school prison pipeline. Florida leads in school arrests, actually, and black students count for about half of those arrests, but they're only about 20% of the students. So you know, so you already see kind of like what that policy is for. And a lot of people, you know, legislation is complicated, but don't, you know, throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I think there is a lot of power in moving legislation to have gains that you want. But like I said, this bottom-up, like grassroots organizing is really important, and we, you know, really do need a new generation of leaders to emerge, because one of the biggest challenges that I see now is like, where is the black left? I don't know, you know, I feel like we're a little waning a little bit as far as the black left, and being able to have a very strong black left, which is, I think, it's really important. But I'm out of time, so I just want to close really quickly. I think where I am right now with all of this is kind of looking again at the public grievance. I'm a labor organizer, so I'm really used to grievances, and you use a grievance to really, it could be an individual issue, but you use it to organize an entire group around it collectively. So we have, you know, individual cases of lives being stolen from our communities, and we need to use that to organize folks around it. And I think where I am now is kind of this idea of public grieving and public mourning, and just like understanding that this is really important to us. So the whole idea, you know, in a white supremacist society, black bodies, black people are not valued. We are dehumanized. So I am saying that we do not hate ourselves. We do not hate each other. We do not hate our children. We do not hate our communities. We have value. You know, we love ourselves. We love each other. We love our families. We love our communities. You know, I love and will continue to love myself in spite of America. America might love me at some point, but I will not wait on it. So that's kind of what
I'm going to introduce the next speaker, Akua, who is an amazing activist for many, many years, not decades, I guess, but decades singular. She is a member of Students Against Mass Incarceration at Columbia University, which formed in the wake of the murder of Troy Davis by the state of Georgia 2 years ago, and she's been organizing on that campus for a while, and she's also a member of the International Socialist Organization there. So welcome, Akua.
So it's really humbling to be on this panel with so many incredible activists that I really look up to, and I've gotten to know Aidge, I just met recently, but just in this organizing in the city, getting to know the activists I'm on the panel with. And so, yeah, I think this panel is really, the perspective of the discussion we're having today is really critical for us to figure out how do we put an end to this? How do we put an end to the vile racism that continues to persist in this country, despite decades and decades and centuries of organizing? I think for a lot of people, this is a really critical question, a big question that I've seen come up at some of the protests that we've been to in the last couple of weeks. A sense of anger, but also demoralization in a sense, right? To hear something, to hear the acquittal of Zimmerman. I think for a lot of people it's very disheartening. I remember hearing and seeing on social media, social circles, just people just breaking down and crying, right? Because it hit home so closely, particularly for Blacks who have to live this day in and day out, as Michelle and you were talking about. And so there's really a big question in front of us. How do we put an end to this? And in this room, I think we all agree what happened to Trayvon Martin is not an isolated incident of vigilantism that went too far. And we can't even pay attention to the media because they have an agenda. That's not naivete, that's just an agenda that's consistent with the racism in this country. But I think for many other people who were angry and came out on the streets and posted about this and are trying to figure things out, it was consistent. They saw the verdict as consistent, and what Zimmerman did, as consistent with the rampant racism that seeps in the very heart of this country from its very beginnings. So let's go back a year and a half ago, right? What happened with Zimmerman and the Zimmerman trial? After 45 days, right, of roaming the streets a free man, post killing a Black kid, it took, there was a national outcry and a courageous persistence of Trayvon's parents that forced the Florida court to finally bring a case against George Zimmerman for the murder of Trayvon Martin. And yet, despite this outcry, despite the outpour of protests across the country, the court system in Florida did everything it could possibly do to ensure that Zimmerman was not held accountable for what essentially was a racist vigilante murder. Most offensively, the court forced race to be removed out of the case. And so what case do you have in defense, to prosecute Zimmerman if you cannot talk about race? And yet, they still allowed the defense to allude to race throughout the trial in what was effectively a prosecution of a dead Black teen, right? And so, case in point, the last witness, the testimony of the last witness, this white woman who basically says Zimmerman was justified because some Black kids broke into, a home in our neighborhood. And basically, it's crazy that this was clearly violates this ban that put the prosecutors from talking about Zimmerman and his racism in the murder of Trayvon. And so, for a lot of us, this miscarriage of justice and the acquittal of Zimmerman has been really enraging, and we've seen it polarize the U.S., right? But in that polarization, we've seen masses of people join the side of racial justice. And it has reopened an explicit conversation about the persistence of racism in the criminal justice system in this country. And particularly for Blacks, this acquittal really was set. It was clear the president this acquittal set for us, right? And what it means for our lives. Because this is not just, another case. I mean, it has material consequences on the lives of Blacks because it was a ticket to any kind of racist, a free ticket to any kind of racist. It sends a message to racist vigilantes, Ku Klux Klan, whoever named them, it sends a message to them that you can kill any Black kid, any Black person, and get away with it. And the law is behind you. And we will do basically nothing to hold you accountable for such actions. And so, we saw how this played out. And in the same vein it really, apart from setting this precedent for what this means for our lives as Blacks, And also it was a painful reminder of how devalued our lives are. When Michelle talked about this, but it's really, I think, important to really reflect on that. Like when you see that on the media, when you see this, and you reflect on it as how, on your life, how you experience racism day to day, how you're followed, how your loved ones are stopped and frisked by the police, whatever it is, people you grew up with, end up in prison, dead, whatever it is. It really was a reminder of how devalued our lives are. And you know, just the racist depictions of Trayvon actually on the news during once Zimmerman was put on trial, and the case took national profile. We saw the ways in which Trayvon's character was kind of put on trial. You see pictures of him shirtless, holding up signs, like stereotypical pictures depicting Black youth, and using that basically to send a message that somehow, you know, Black men, Black youth are deserving of this kind of violence because they dress a certain way, they pose a certain way, they look a certain way, whatever it is. And so, for, you know, I had this down. Did people see the tweet by George Zimmerman's brother, Robert Zimmerman? If you remember, not too long ago, he tweeted an image comparing another Black youth who's being railroaded, framed basically by the Georgia state for a murder of a baby, a white baby. I don't know if people have been following this. Socialist worker put an article out today. You should definitely check it out. But basically, it was a picture of Trayvon next to this another Black youth who was facing a murder trial. That said, and then Robert basically in his tweet said, "Black teens killed," and used this to justify his brother's action. And it was this kind of like stereotypical images that basically we see day in and day out depicting Black men as violent and deserving of criminalization, etc. And by the way, people should look up the case in Georgia. More and more evidence indicate that the mother might be the one who actually killed the baby, and not the Black teens who were being put on trial for murder. The two Black teens. So another case that we really should look into, and teams that we should, a struggle we should take up as well in this discussion. But you know, the Zimmerman, before I spend a lot of time on that, but the Zimmerman verdict was not so surprising, especially when you look at the statistics in these states that have shoot first laws. So this statistic really blew my mind. A study that was recently done a couple of years ago indicated that whites who killed Blacks in 30 or so states that have shoot first laws were 350 times more likely to be found justified in their action than if they killed a white person. But even in states that do not have these laws, whites who kill Blacks in non-shoot first states are 250 times more likely to be found justified in their action than if they killed a white person. So, you know, the message is clear, right? Whites are given the privilege and given the benefit of the doubt when they perpetuate crimes against Blacks, and Blacks are prosecuted for their own, for being victims. And so I think it's really clear why there's so much anger for Blacks who see this, and this is a reality. It's not a big surprise for us. It was really something that was enraging, and that's moving a lot of people to act. And you know, in this, when we're talking about how do we put an end to this, right? How do we build the movement and build up the momentum that this acquittal has created? I think it's really important for us to look back to the civil rights era, 50 years ago at the March of Washington, when a brother by the name of John Lewis, 23-year-old leader in the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, shared perspectives on how Blacks at that moment in time could build an anti-racist movement during the civil rights era. And I think what he said really captures the anger and frustration that many of us feel today around the criminal justice system and the acquittal within that system. This quote is a bit lengthy, but I wanted to read it because it really provides some insightful perspectives for us in figuring out some of these questions. He stated, "We will not wait for the courts to act, for we have been waiting for hundreds of years. We will not wait for the President, the Justice Department, nor Congress, but we will take matters into our hands and create a source of power outside of any national structure that could and would assure us a victory. To those who have said, be patient and wait. We must say that patience is a dirty and nasty word. We must say that we must say what we have long said, that we cannot be patient. We do not want to be free gradually, we want to be free now. We are tired of being beaten by policemen. We're tired of seeing our people locked up in jail and over again. And then we're told, be patient. Well, how can we be patient? We want our freedom and we want it now. We cannot depend on any political party, for both the Democrats and the Republicans have betrayed the basic principles of the Declaration of Independence. We all recognize the fact that if any radical social, political, and economic changes are to take place in our society, the people, the masses, must bring them about." And that was John Lewis 50 years ago. We're not talking about now, and this was 50 years ago, right? What does it mean when we say justice for Trayvon, particularly? Because I think that's the question in front of us, and then there are bigger questions around building on this movement for a larger kind of more general struggle against racism. First, I think it means the Justice Department bringing some kind of civil rights charges against these states that carry these shoot first laws and standing ground laws, and bringing a case specifically to Zimmerman, putting Zimmerman behind bars for the crime of killing an innocent black kid. It also means the state of Florida apologizing to Marissa Alexander and dropping all charges against her and failing her in her fight against domestic violence that eventually led her to prison, right? Releasing 15-year-old Christian Hernandez, another kid who was failed by the failing social welfare system, a kid that was a product of sexual abuse, negligence, etc., but that was not helped by the state, and eventually beat up his 2-year-old brother who died, but has been in prison for 3 years as a 12-year-old, the youngest kid to be in prison for murder or something like that. And it means really releasing this kid and providing him with the rehabilitative services that he deserves, right? It means re-indicting Ramarley Graham's murderer, Richard Hayes. For their racist acts of police brutality that have killed many, many lives, hundreds and hundreds of Trayvons in the past. It means putting an end to the racist stop and frisk policies and all such policies across the country that Aidge was talking about. In the same light, it means ensuring that Ray Kelly does not get appointed as the new director of Homeland Security. Because what that effectively means is that stop and frisk is going to become a national policy, is what that effectively means, right? And so that is a struggle that we need to take up too. It means repealing mandatory minimum sentence laws. It means taking up the struggle that the dream defenders are leading right now, doing direct actions, doing sit-ins, and holding accountable their state in regards to racial profiling, stand your ground laws, and the school to prison pipeline. And their demands are really important and something that we need to figure out how to support. It means putting an end to the racist, cruel, and unusual death penalty that takes the lives of many, many innocent people and others who do not deserve to be treated in such a cruel way. It means putting an end to the personal responsibility politics that continues to blame blacks instead of blaming the laws that criminalize blacks and the racism that puts us in the situations that endanger our lives, right? And we need to put an end to that because it is really the responsibility from these laws and puts it onto us, right? And we know that it doesn't matter what you look like, what you're wearing. Racist vigilantes don't rationalize their fucking racism when they see you. Trayvon was wearing skinny khakis, when he was murdered. So take that Fox News and use that too. I don't know, it probably blows your mind knowing that blacks wear khakis. Anyway, sorry, it was just ridiculous how blacks are depicted, right? Anyway, you would think, sorry, I'm going to go over the tangent. How ridiculous it was, stereotypes are. Anyway, so, and lastly, me building on the legacy of past anti-racist and Black Power movements that have challenged the racism at the roots of American society. I think for us, as the 50th anniversary approaches next month, and as people mobilize for DC, we really have to raise the profile. We have to join the struggle and raise the profile for justice for Trayvon against the different manifestations of racism in this country that are still prevalent 50 years later. Days later, after mobilizing for DC, we also should join the call for a National Day of Action for Trayvon that's been called by Dream Defenders. And I think people might talk more about this. It's in the development, but it's something we should talk about. And beyond that, we should really take the next couple of weeks leading up to these actions to engage in conversations with people in our schools, our communities, our workplaces, to figure out how do we get more of us into these types of rooms and onto the streets and into these national actions, etc., to build on this momentum. The founders of racism, particularly anti-Black racism in the United States, after years of a conservative attempt to sanitize it with post-racial discourse, is being exposed for what it is. The last few years of activism has rekindled a public and critical conversation and activism around race and racism. And in the midst of this disheartening acquittal, there's also a hope for rebuilding an unapologetic movement against racism. And for those of us who live through this dehumanizing environment treatment under racism, I think there's too much at stake to not build on this momentum. And we don't know where things will go, but we don't have an option but to fight. And we won't know what is possible unless we actually move and build. And so it's critical what we do today. Our movement must take up all aspects of racism and its different manifestations, be it the multiple oppression that Black women and queer Blacks face, the vigilantism and police surveillance of Black men that Black men are subjected to, the pull your pants up, personal responsibility, blame the victim discourse, the substandard wages, housing, and education system that many Black and brown people are subjected to. Our strategy must take the form of a multiracial mass movement led by those most affected, which utilizes multiple tactics to escalate our demands and expand our social base. There are indeed many challenges in front of us, including the absence of a strong left, due to the backlash against those who fought in the 60s and 70s and the games that they won. But building a mass movement against racism is part and parcel with rebuilding a stronger left. It will be a process that moves us on the urgency. It will be a process that moves us on the urgency of struggles facing us, but that understands that this is a long-term process that will take years of patient base building with moments of explosions and lulls, wins and defeats, but one that must keep chipping away at the monstrous and systemic and everyday racism at the heart of this country. And really, there's too much to lose not to do that. I think, if anything, the murder of Trayvon and the acquittal of him really shows the dangers and what's ahead if we do not fight and move on this question.
I know I've already quoted Michelle Alexander once tonight, so just bear with me, but I just want to share with you 3 short sentences that Michelle Alexander wrote as a statement of support for Ramarley Graham's family, who are fighting a long, hard, tough fight for justice. And this is what she wrote just 2 weeks ago. "We cannot rest until justice is done for Ramarley Graham. Like Trayvon Martin, Graham was presumed guilty of little more than being a Black man, presumed guilty without evidence, without a trial, without due process, without acknowledgement of his basic humanity. If we fail to stand our ground in cases like this, we can rest assured that the system will continue to do what it has done for decades with indifference and impunity, destroy the lives and dreams of young Black men like Trayvon Martin and Ramarley Graham." I want to, it's really more than an honor to be able to introduce Constance Malcolm, who is Ramarley Graham's mother, sitting up here. I think for many of us in this room, Constance is really someone who has been a beacon of struggle and fight and resistance for all of us. And I think the fact that we have an indictment against a New York City, we had an indictment, we won it, and we're going to get it again, against a New York City police officer for the first time since Trayvon is a tribute to the fact that the parents of Ramarley Graham, Constance Malcolm, and Frank Graham are not going away. They're not going quietly, and they're standing up and fighting for justice. So, Constance, it is really a great honor to pass this microphone over to you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
As you see me set up here today, it hasn't been a good day for me for the last couple of days. But I always taught my kids to fight for what they believe in. And that's why I'm here, and I'm going to fight for my son. Ramon was 18 years old, just like Trayvon on his way home. As you know, Ramon was killed February 2nd, and Trayvon was killed February 26th, I think like 2 or 3 weeks later. It's similar. Trayvon was wearing a hoodie, Marty was wearing a baggy pants, and that's how they profiled them. Not because you wear a hoodie or a baggy pants, you're a thug. When Ramon initially first got murdered, he had all kind of stories splashed across the TV, and this is before they knew we had a video on the house that showed my son walking. The video showing him a White Plains Road walking with 2 friends, and all he was guilty of is stop and give his friend a pound. And that's when they supposedly saw a butt of a gun in his waist, all because he just his pants. And the media took it and ran with it, and Ramon was buying drugs, he was selling drugs, and all this other story you heard. And at the end of the day, they said, well, after they killed my son, first of all, after they killed him, there was no gun to be found. After no gun was found, they found a bag of weed. Okay, they found a bag of weed. These are narcotics officers. They are allowed to carry weed. My first question to the district attorney was, who print was on that bag? Nobody. So how is this my son weed? Not only that, you're gonna murder my son for a bag of weed? This is what this world come to, and this is what we have to fight for. I'm not saying it's right, it's not legal. Well, I guess it's legal now because a bag, all they give you for a ticket, I guess. I don't smoke, so I don't know. But, you know, we have to fight for our kids and, you know, stand up for our kids and let them know that we're here for them no matter what the situation is. Because oftentimes we get a lot of chumped up charges on these kids and then they go to court, and because the case has been dragged out so much for a year or so, and you have some of these legal aid lawyers that they use it, tell them to plead guilty, and it will only stay in the trial for like 6 months or a year. And this is a problem, and this is what following them around. And then the media put up on the TV, oh, they have a record. A record of what? There's no record. They tell them to stay in the trial for 6 months, and some of these records, they tell them they're sponged, but when it comes to black people, there's no sponge records. It's never been sponged. And oftentimes, you know, when a person is deceased, or you hear all these stories about them. Ramon was 18 years old. Ramon loved people. He loved his friend. Ramon would do anything for anybody. That's just the kind of person he was, and that's how I grow my kids. I have 3 kids. Ramon is the second one. I have a daughter, she's older, and believe it or not, she wanted to be a police officer. She passed the test for a police officer. So it's not like I'm against all police, I'm not anti-police. I'm against the ones that doesn't do their job, not the one that act like a thug, like a criminal, breaking in people's house without a warrant. That's who I'm fighting against. I'm pretty sure a lot of you might know what happened on May 15th when we went to court. That's the last court day we had when we went to court, and Judge Barrett threw out the case because he said the grand jury was he wasn't instructed properly because two little words, N and R. That's why the case was thrown out. But we fought hard and we stand up, and I told Robert Johnson, we don't want to appeal. We wanted to go back to the grand jury. We got that. He went back to the grand jury, and they're about to wrap up now. So we should know something by next couple of weeks, and we have some pamphlets here that Jose would let you know about them. And we asking people, no matter what the verdict is, good or bad, we're going to get out in the street and let them know that we're going to stand up, not just for Ramarley, for all kids, Black, Latino, because this is who is affected. These are my kids. These are what I'm fighting for. And as you might know also, I have a 6, well, he's 7, he's going to be 8 next month. When this happened, he was 6. He was inside my home when the police broke down my door and shot Ramarley right in front of him and my grandma and my mom. And after they killed Ramarley, they took my mom to the precinct and held her for 7 hours, questioning her, trying to put words in her mouth. But like again, she's a strong woman. She held the ground and she was not about to let that go down. She tell them like it is. That's not how it happened, and she tell them what happened. So we hoping, and we're gonna continue to fight, and I hope y'all continue to fight with me. I know there's a lot of college students here, and it's pretty soon y'all be going back to school. Hopefully when this trial starts, we get an indictment. I'm gonna keep asking that we get an indictment again, and then we proceed to go to the trial. When you go back to school, I'm asking you, if you belong to a student organization, let the people on the campus know what's going on. Let people know, because this is how we're gonna break the cycle, and we're gonna bring changes to, to the city. And let Mayor Bloomberg and Kelly know we are fed up and tired of his unruly cop running around the city acting like they're above the law, which they're not above the law. They're not doing the law. Like I said, my 6-year-old son was in the house. He's going to be 8 next month. And like I said, I'm not fighting for Ramarley. Ramarley is no longer here. I'm fighting for my son, Chinar, which will be 8, and the rest of the people, that's here, that it hasn't been happening to yet. And I said yet because it will happen again. It will happen again, believe it or not, because they are not stopping. They don't care about us as Black and Latino because they feel we less than a person. We are not less than a person. We bleed the same blood that anybody else bleeds. We all shed blood red. And that's what they gotta understand. It's hard for me to sit here and say, I believe in the system. I don't have faith in the system anymore. All that is gone. It's gone. And even though I sit here, I don't know what's going to become of this case. And you see how the Zimmerman verdict went. When I saw that, it makes me think what will become of my case. Because all of this murder that's been perpetrated is all in the street. And when it came into my house, I'm looking like, wow, you're not even safe in your own home. So where are you safe? And it happened to me. Don't believe it can't happen to you. Ramarley wasn't doing anything. All he was guilty of is just walking home. So it could happen to you. Come in their house one night and, the cop wants to stop you and decide, I ain't doing nothing, I'm going home. You don't know what's gonna happen to you. And then they chop up charge later, you arrested and arrest and all this other charge that they always do. It's not right, and that's what we have to let Mayor Bloomberg and Kelly knows, that enough is enough. Your officer needs to take better control of the street, and this is why we can't bridge the gap between the police officer, because they're not trying to meet us halfway. Even trying to meet us halfway, it will help. It will help a little bit. But if they're treating us like criminals, like animals all the time, how could we even try to work with them? And it's not going to happen if they keep behaving like this. So I'm asking the people, like I said, just help us get justice for Ramarley, and justice for Ramarley is justice for all. We have a petition, we have a sign-up sheet here. because we don't know when the verdict's going to come back. So we're asking people to sign and let us in. We will let you know, by Facebook or email what the verdict is, because as soon as we get it, we're going to be at the district attorney office. So you have to stay tuned to Facebook, Twitter, whatever social media, you have to stay tuned for that, and that's how you get the information of what happened in the grand jury. Thank you, and I really, really appreciate your support.
The last speaker is THENJIWE McHARRIS, who is, many people know her. She's a great organizer with Million Hoodies, and is really like an incredibly fearless and tireless activist. I first met THENJIWE around the fight to stop the execution of Troy Davis. And that was actually a long and hard fight, and I think kind of really underscores how steep the hill is to climb. And so I know she has a lot to say about where we've been and where we're going, so give it up for THENJIWE.
Let me try that again. How y'all doing? Let me tell you how I'm doing. I'm pretty angry. Are y'all angry? Let me tell you why I'm angry. I'm angry because Troy Davis's last words were, "I am not the only Troy Davis, there's more coming after me," and he was right. I'm angry that Aidriano Jones, 7 years old, because of a raid in Detroit, was shot in the head and in the neck. I am angry that Kimani Gray's last words were, "Please don't let me die." I am angry that Constance has to be here to not just mourn for her son, but demand justice for her son. The bodies of our children are piling up. We are having to wash their blood off of our streets. I am angry that we found success, some of us, not me, but some of us, found success in the words of Barack Obama when he said, "I could have been Troy Davis. I'm sorry, I could have been Trayvon Martin." Yes, you could have been, but you acted more like George Zimmerman with the amount of children that you're killing all over the world. Has 20 years in prison. I am angry that we continue to not just kill our babies, but let them go to jail while they scream for us. They are screaming for us. Trayvon Martin is not the only child screaming for help. Kimani Gray screamed for help. Our children are screaming for help. We have tolerated the killing of our babies for way too long. Now is the time. Not tomorrow, not next week, not next month, right now. It will not stop. We will continue to mourn Trayvon Martins. I am angry because we say we're gonna keep fighting so that there are no more Trayvon Martins. There's going to be. They're gonna keep on coming. They're gonna be 6 years old, they're gonna be 17, they're gonna be 30, they're gonna be of all ages. They're gonna be kids that look like me, look like some of you. They're gonna be young people that are struggling only to survive and trying to tell themselves, despite a world that tells them to the contrary, that their lives matter. Listen, black lives in this country do not matter. Poor people do not matter. We didn't have to wait for a verdict in the George Zimmerman case to realize that the bodies of our babies don't matter. They don't. They're not going to matter until we choose to make them matter. We can't just resist. We have to confront power. How do we confront power? We go to power. We go to someone like President Obama, who is right now in the business of being the bodyguard of white interests, the interests of the elite, and we confront them. We confront them like what we're seeing in Florida. We have to confront them in every city, in every state throughout this country. We need to mobilize. If we don't, we're not giving the generations coming a fighting chance. Are you ready? Yes. I really don't believe you. Are you ready? Yes. Because this is a long fight. This is going to take sacrifice. This is going to take more than putting on a hoodie, more than mobilizing to the street. This is going to take your life, your body, to tell our children that we don't give a fuck if they think that our children don't matter. they matter to us. And today, and every single day, we're going to show them just how much our children matter. You know, deep down, I think a lot of us were hurt. I'm hurt. I'm tired of protesting the death of yet another person, another black body. While they took their life, they called it justice. I'm tired. But when I see courageous people like the woman sitting to my left, fighting for justice for her son, man, it gives me so much courage. It gives me courage every single time I decide to walk outside the door and confront power. Whether it's a police officer that decided to pull yet another young black man over because he thought that he just jumped the turnstile and decides to humiliate him by putting him in handcuffs. What does confront power look like then? Well, confronting power looks like sitting next to him. We can't let them continue to humiliate our children. They're not just killing them physically, they're killing them emotionally and spiritually and psychologically. Enough is enough. I don't want to wait for the next Trayvon Martin or Ramarley Graham for us to mobilize and decide that the time is now. We have to decide right here. It starts with us. There's no social transformation without individual transformation. What is it going to take? Our children are screaming for you.
I guess this kind of really responds to what Aidge just brought up as far as, you know, how can we use these spaces? And I think the biggest thing always, we need to be organizing to build capacity to, like, I like the way THENJIWE, but at first I said shift power, but to really confront power and then shift it. You know, to be in the face of power and shift it. Power exists. We see it, we know where it is. We have to be able to confront it and then shift it to where it needs to be. And so one of the biggest steps that I'm curious about how to make it happen, and I can't remember your name, but you spoke about it a little bit of kind of, you know, different communities, whether it's blacks, Latinos. You know, people always use the phrase people of color. That's a hell of a lot of people in the world, right? That's a hell of a lot of people, all right? And we're not all going through the same thing at the same time at all. But again, I'm gonna go back to the root cause of white supremacy because it's so insidious in that we don't even really have to name it, but we can manifest it and perpetuate it against each other. Even in communities of color, within black communities, within Latino communities, within queer communities, we can perpetuate white supremacist patriarchy against each other. So, the first step that I think that I want to be working with people on is how to create these spaces to build, to heal and to build within our communities and then be working in solidarity with other affected communities. How can we get to the point where we can have very difficult conversation of how we are hurting each other through white supremacist ideology, through patriarchy, white supremacist patriarchal ideology, all these words. Like, you know, how are we actually doing the work of white supremacy without even being white half the time? How are we doing that? So that's kind of what, you know, I wanted to close, seeing so many different people. We need to look inside ourselves and figure out, you know, where are we perpetuating the problem so we can start working together to solve it. Thank you.
Thank you everyone for such a great meeting, discussion, and I think just based on what people got up and said, there's just so much happening. It's really encouraging to hear all the different organizing that's happening. I think this is really, it shows kind of a glimpse of, and it gives a direction for how we can move forward, right? And so I'm really excited for the possibilities ahead of us. I think there's, you know, there's definitely, this discussion just scratched the surface of all the different issues and questions in front of us. And it's definitely not an end, I think. Really, if anything, what I want to say in conclusion is really for us to engage and continue in having these kind of conversations, but also acting on them and figuring out how to continue to expand on this and bring in more people into this organization. As many have said on the panel, this is a a monstrous system, right? That we are fighting against racism, the way it's persisted from the beginnings of this country and metamorphosized over the decades and different periods, just show how critical it is. Shows how critical it is to American capitalism, to dividing working people and other people, different oppressed people from each other. And so I think it makes that work much more harder for us. But looking back in past struggles and ways in which it's been chipped at, Sherry was talking about this, like ways in which movements have changed consciousness and moved people to action, inspired other movements, really shows the possibilities ahead of us. And Michelle, you were bringing this up in your talk, that is it possible to fight against racism, right? And a lot of times it just feels really heavy. And for many of us who experience it on a day-to-day basis, it feels impossible. It's been 3 minutes. Okay, like I said, lots of good talking to do, and figuring out to do. But basically, I think really for us, the next step is really trying to take this on the national level and building locally for the national march, but also bringing that back, right? Making connections, learning lessons, struggling with others nationally, and bringing that back into our localities, into our schools, into our workplaces, our communities, etc., and to support local struggles like Constance's struggle for justice, for Ramarley, for Kimani Gray, for all those who've been victims of racism and continue to have to deal with this every day. And I think connecting these national struggles and bringing it to the local ones and having both work together to build the basis of this movement, and for it will determine the future of a larger movement that brings this to an end, and it really has to end. So thank you so much.
I just want to say again, thank everybody that been supported Ramarley's Call. We do have a website, www.ramarleyscall@.net. And we also have an email, ramarleyscall@gmail. If you didn't get a chance to sign the clipboard, you can always send us an email. We also have a telephone number, but believe me, I can't remember half the stuff. I don't remember the number. But if you send us an email at the Gmail account, we will respond back to you. And if you want to leave also your email there, we can always add you to the list, and you know what's going on. Because I'm not really a Facebook person. I just go and post and get right off. So you won't see me on there, but if you leave me a message sometime, I will go and just check it and come right back off. And again, I just want to say thank you for everybody that's been supporting us, Ramarley's Call, and all the other family, because after we bury our loved ones sometime, everybody disappear, and we go right back, to our little holes, or like I said, today was not a good day for me. There's days that I don't want to get up. There's days I don't want to be places like this. But I know I could make a difference, not just for Ramarley, but like Chantel Davis. Natasha's not here, but she's always supported whatever I do. And I couldn't sit here and didn't mention Chantel Davis, because it's a young lady that was killed in Brooklyn by Hopkins. And this was like a terror in Brooklyn. This is a nightmare was waiting to happen from this man. He had 6 pending lawsuits. I believe 4 was paid out already. So you see what kind of people we're dealing with in New York City. And this is why I'm out here, to make a difference and make sure another mom like me is not feeling the same pain. Like I said again, we know it's going to happen again, but if I could prevent one mom from crying, that's one kid worth saving. Thank you.
First, I just want to thank each and every one of you. Just hearing you speak, seeing your faces, fills me with so much love and inspiration and courage to keep going. So I want to thank you. We do have some next steps. People are mobilizing at the local, state, and national level at this point. We're going to hold an organizing meeting this coming Tuesday at 6:30. If folks are interested in that meeting, please sign up. I have a sheet up here. Unfortunately, I have to run and leave here, but the sheet will be up here and we will help collect it. So I think it's in my tradition and the tradition of our people to lead out with a chant. Is that all right? Yeah. Okay. So I'm going to ask you to stand up, okay? on her head for something she did not do. So we are going to do her chant. I'm short of it. We're going to do her chant. The way it is, you repeat what I say. You start off at the pace that I start off, and then we get higher, okay? Now, I'm going to tell you two things. I want the building to shake at the end. And two, don't ever speak just with your throat and your mouth. You pull it from your stomach and from your heart. And we do it for all those that can't be here, whether they're behind bars or 6 feet under. Is that all right? Okay. It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
We have nothing to lose but our chains.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to fight.
It is our duty to win.
It is our duty to win.
We have nothing to lose
We have nothing to lose
but our chains.
but our chains.